friends and welcome to Generation Pixel. This is Stuart and today I've been pondering the age-old question: if I was stuck on a desert island but was allowed to take one console with me, what would it be? Well, it took about a microsecond for me to decide and the answer was simple: this. Now let's all just take a moment to soak in the glory and the beauty of the PlayStation 2. Okay, fine, there is nothing much beautiful about it, and not even my Aqua Satin version can make it look any more pretty. But you know what? The rugged, angular, rigid design suits this particular console down to a T, and the reason for that, it was a tank. It still is a tank. Over 150 million of these sold, and most of them are still out there and working today. And not many consoles pre-1992 can make that claim. But hey, this is about being stranded on a desert island, so we can't sit here admiring the beauty of the PlayStation 2. We need to talk about the thing that makes it really worthwhile taking on the deserted island, and that is the games. Now for this challenge I've set myself 5 ground rules, because what's a challenge without ground rules? Ground rule number 1, no internet. And why? Because I should be grateful that I'm getting electricity and a console on a desert island, never mind internet. Ground rule number 2, only 5 games. The reason I came to that decision was I wanted to be able to carry them comfortably enough in one hand. Ground rule number 3, 5 different genres. And why? Because I don't want to get bored, obviously. Ground rule number 4, no PS1 games. Now the PS2 can play PS1 games comfortably, and I love many of them, but I thought if I'm taking the console, I'm taking the games. And ground rule number 5, no games that I haven't played before. If this seems odd because you think you would take games you hadn't played before to increase the novelty value of the games, well, I thought differently. I thought I don't want to take 5 games I've never played and have 5 games I absolutely detest while I'm on this desert island. So there we go, 5 ground rules. Okay, straight on to game number 1. Genre, RPG, or more specifically, JRPG. The title of the game, Grandia, and the reasons why are this. Firstly, and probably most importantly, Grandia 2 managed to beat Final Fantasy X to the punch. Had it released any later, I may never have played the game. Or at least not for a long time. Because the Final Fantasy series had captivated me since 7. And 10 would have caused me to overlook Grandia 2 had Grandia 2 not released first. And Grandia 2 had everything I was looking for in a RPG. The reluctant hero, in this case Ryudo, a geohound or a lone gun type character. Mercenary, if you will. A huge, sweeping quest to save the world against unsurmountable odds. And combine this with what was next gen PlayStation 2 graphics, I was captivated. The story arc, well, nothing new, but nothing under the sun is. But it is a fantastic story. Well developed characters, a range of fantastic companions, and of course, delightful antagonists. Now I won't go into too much detail because of, well, spoilers. But Grandia 2 quickly became a must-play game for me, and it's a game that I can return to time and time again. So there we go, making it an easy choice to take on a desert island with only 4 other games to play. Game number 2, sports. Now full disclosure, I'm not a sports guy. I don't think I've ever been a sports guy or ever will be a sports guy. But in video game form, there are a few sports that I can quite tolerate, and one of them is golf. So with me I'll take Tiger Woods and any of the titles that came out for the PS2. Now, there's no need for me to go on for a long time about Tiger Woods on the PlayStation 2. All of the games, pretty much the same. Graphically, nothing special for the era. Gameplay, nothing complex. But I think that's what the attraction is with me. It's not frenetic, it's not high paced, it's not terribly taxing on the mind. So for hours and hours at a time I could sit and quite happily just play Tiger Woods. The simple gameplay of just picking a club, lining up your shot and taking the shot, moving on to the next shot and repeat. And yes, it does sound dull, I would imagine, to someone who has never played the games before, but there is without doubt something nicely relaxing about not having to overthink in a gaming environment. So I suppose in many ways the inclusion of a Tiger Woods game, whichever one, would merely be a respite between the next either high action game or complex storyline. Just a little buffer between intense and fast and furious. And that's why I would take a Tiger Woods game to the desert island. 3. Shooter or anything with guns, and for that I'm taking Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Without a doubt, my favourite in the entire series. Now before I talk about GTA San Andreas, I've got one hot take. I don't like GTA games. Now before you all get up in arms, it's nothing to do with the amount of work or effort that goes into producing these games. Also, it's nothing to do with the levels of violence in these games. It's merely that games with the longevity of GTA and the time you have to invest in them requires me to have some sort of empathy for the character, or at least the main character. And that's why out of all the GTA games that have been released since the early days, so starting at GTA 3, San Andreas has been the only one that I've truly enjoyed playing. But lucky for me, because being stranded on a desert island, GTA San Andreas has a fantastically huge map and more story and side missions than I can care to list. And not only that, being a PlayStation 2 game, it of course had cheat codes. Get bored with the story missions, spawn any vehicle you like in the game and just cruise the city. Get bored driving, spawn a jetpack and fly the city. And the cheat lists went on and on. Now obviously as a shooter, you would think I would have the option of a first person shooter to put into this category. Unfortunately, second hot take, first person shooters give me motion sickness. Or at least they did in the early days. Fortunately now I seem to be over that spell, but for the PlayStation 2 era, I was stuck well and truly with third person shooters. But hey, GTA San Andreas, not a bad game to be stuck with on a desert island. Genre number 4, platformers. Now most people will agree that we get spoiled for choice with platformers in every system. But for me, it has to be Prince of Persia, Sands of Time. Now the reason that I'm picking Prince of Persia, Sands of Time is because I've only finished the game once. Now that's not because I didn't like the game, it's just that I had plenty more options at the time. And also, on the PlayStation 2, I didn't play a lot of platform games. Sure, take me back to the original PlayStation, and there were loads of platformers that I played. Prince of Persia 2 was one of the rare platformers that I played and loved. Now I could go on about how wonderful it looked, and how divine the story was, and how intuitive the gameplay was. I could also mention how well it controlled. But for me, the selling point, and it was the selling point of the game, was a very unique time rewind game mechanic. I loved the fact that the game was told in the form of a story being related to someone else. So when you did fail to jump and ended up plummeting to your death, the narrator would simply say, no, it didn't happen like that, as you were rewinding the gameplay with your controller. Having obviously played most of the early brutal platformers, this was such a refreshing gameplay mechanic. Because gone was the frustration of dying time and time again only to be sent back to the same spot, or sometimes to the very beginning of a level. Here you were with the opportunity just to rewind time a few steps or so and take you back before you failed. And the game is obviously well loved by more than just myself, as at the time of recording, Ubisoft are about to release a remaster of the game. And I'm pretty sure I'll enjoy the game all over again. And of course I believe it will bring in players who have never played it before. But of course for my desert island journey, I'm going to be stuck with the PlayStation 2 version, which will suit me just fine. And for the fifth and final genre, action adventure, I present Tomb Raider Anniversary Edition. Now I can't think myself of a more perfect game to remaster than Tomb Raider. I obviously played the original on the PlayStation 1 to death, and that was with having to deal with the awful tank controls at the time. Now obviously as a player from the early days, tank controls didn't bother me too much because there were no other options, that's what we had. And of course when you get used to them, it becomes second nature to play that way. With Tomb Raider Anniversary we could play a game that we loved, but with modern control schemes. And as for its ability to keep me entertained on my desert island, well, I've been playing Tomb Raider since it first released. So that's what, over 20 years now it's been keeping me entertained. So I think a little spell on a desert island, it'll cope just fine. So that brings us to the end of yet another episode of Generation Pixel. And thank you again for watching, and I hope you watch more in the future. And remember, be yourself, always be yourself. Unless you can be Baby Yoda, then always be Baby Yoda. Bye!